Mr. Baracus joining us in
Yeah, I'm sure he'll be in. I'm sure he'll sit in, but it's not important if he's here for mine.
Okay. Good morning. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. My name is Carrie Linklater, and your chairperson today. On the panel, I'm joined by Linda McFadden to my left, and my far left, Mr. Robert Buss. Our city assessors today are Jonathan Spacek and Matthew Baracus. Our admin secretary is Michelle Meepin. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by City Council and is independent of it and the city administration. Makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value, classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. And as information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. Swear everybody in. Thank you. Okay, I'll start here.
Sure, okay. Oh, you were gonna do
That's
that.
okay, that's okay. Can you state your full name, please?
Rod Slaughter.
Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you. I'll come around and sure. Would you like to be sworn in or affirmed?
Affirmed.
Affirmed, sure. Can you state your full name, please?
Michael Lennon.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Sworn in
Yeah,
or-
swear, sure.
Sorry?
Swear.
Swear? Can you put your hand on the Bible?
Yes.
Can you state your full name, please?
Jonathan Spacek?
Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Just, yeah.
Sorry, did you say? Oh, thank you.
So, good morning, Mr. Spacek.
Yep, perfect.
And good morning, Mr. Lennon and Mr. Slaughter. So I understand we are hearing subs today, starting with 9/12 and 2016 and 2017 are together?
Yes.
Okay. And we have 2018. So if you'd like to start us off.
All right, thank you very much. Today we're starting with the roll year 2016 and 17 for 912 Archibald Street. It is a vacant piece of land we are looking at, 33,111 square feet. Total value for 16 and 17 for the supplementary notice is 538,000. A little background on the property: this used to be two separate parcels and they were put together as one. That's why the replot happened. The old value for the two together, I believe they were heard in 2016 originally at the Board of Revision. Total value 496. After the replot and put into one parcel, it's at 538,000. If you look at, if you're not familiar where it is, this is just north of Elizabeth Road on Archibald, right across from the backside of the St. Boniface Golf Course. If you look at my page 2 and 3, I've included some pictures so you can get an idea of the piece of land. You can see it's right on the corner of Elizabeth and Archibald there. And I've included a street view picture of it as well. If If you turn to my page 4, I've included the current zoning of this parcel. It's zone C2. You can see on the map the kind of zoning around it. There's some behind it. There's some residential. There's commercial zoning across the street from it as well. Page 5 is just our cost summary showing the total value. Page 6, if you turn on the back side, I put together some land sale comparables, and under those land sale comparables is actually our land valuation. So you can see the rate per square foot we're giving it for 1617, 1625 a square foot at the bottom graph there. And this works out to that 538,000 if you do it for the 33,111 square feet. So if you just take a peek at the top left-hand side of this page, it's my land sale comparables. I've put together pretty much 4 comparables, one showing, and the bottom I've used twice at the 2 different sales. So the first one I've used 2470 Main Street, and I've included pictures of all these on the next few pages if you want to take a look. But all my comparables, I've tried to put as close to that 33,000 square feet as I could, so trying to find lots of similar size, and I also tried to stay close, but again, we're looking at 1617, so we're using a reference date of April 1st, 2014. So I do sales all before that, which, you know, again, we in my opinion, after looking at the more recent ones, we have limited options. So keep that in mind. So you see my first comparable is 2470 Main Street, and it works out, if you look at the land size of 23,000 square feet over the sale price, it's $23.15, and that was sold in May of 2013. Again, using the reference date of 14, so a little off, about by almost a year. 250 Marion, you can see sold for $600,000, and it's again a 23,000 square foot lot, and it worked out to $25 a square foot. I would argue, and same with 755 Henderson, $500,000 sale in April 2010, so it's an older sale. It would need to be, none of my numbers are time adjusted, so it would, in my eyes, it would need to be time adjusted positively, but I left it at the original sale price of 28,000 square foot land size, worked out to $17.55 a square foot. I would argue these are all, I would not say these are exactly the same locations. Archibald worse than Henderson, Maine, and Marion, but again, these are the best sales size-wise I could find at this time. I've also included 1328 Plessis, which is my last 2 comparables. So we have 2 recorded sales of the same parcel at 2 different times. So it first sold in November 3rd, 2010. For $18 a square foot, and then it sold again in 2013, so 3 years later, sold for $29.21 a square foot. Again, I didn't do in-depth paired analysis or anything like that, but I did include it to try to show a similar size lot. There was an appreciation of sale from 2010 to 13, just to keep that in mind. Our subject property is at $16.25, so it is below the sales I'm showing here of, how do I put this, of you know, slightly superior locations, but again, I believe the 1625 is fair, and the 538,000 is fair. I would also, just one last point to make is, when we did this replot, we're putting 2 lots together into one bigger size, so there's a slight increase in value, and I believe that could be attributed to the increased utility of the lot when you have a larger lot to build on, as opposed to having to deal with 2 separate lots. So it's just one justification for the higher lot price after the replot was done. So again, I'd just like to keep that in mind, and if you have any questions, please let me know.
All right, thank you. Questions?
Sure. We have some questions, and we also have some rebuttal evidence. Did you want us, are we able to present?
Just if you can just do your questions now, and then the panel will ask questions, and then if you have rebuttal, you can.
Okay, thank you. Firstly, as you had mentioned, you mentioned that the SUP, my understanding is the SUP was triggered because this is a merger of the 2 properties. Are you aware that, and you mentioned you are aware that the Board of Revision had significantly reduced these properties individually in the past before they were combined to a combined value of $496,000? I'm
aware that that was the decision, yes.
Okay. And are you aware that the owner had further appealed this decision to the Manitoba Municipal Board?
Yes.
Okay. Why, I guess we're wondering why the city had proposed such a significant increase in the land value over and above what the Board of Revision had decided for each individual lot when they were combined.
I believe I answered that, but the increased utility of when you're taking two separate lots and making them into one lot, in my eyes, that's worth more. You can build bigger buildings, you have more options on what to build. I believe the increase is justified there.
Okay. Are you aware that the two properties were purchased as one economic unit June 2014 for a combined value of $350,000?
I was not aware.
Okay. Would you agree that a site that has higher levels of traffic would command a higher market value?
I would agree with you.
Would you also agree that a site that has proximity to a greater variety and amount of amenities would have higher market value
Absolutely.
than one that does not? Anything else to add?
Yeah, Mr. Spacek, just to confirm then, as of July 6th is the effective date, 2016. That's the date of the merger
Okay.
of the two sites. And the property is purchased as two separate parcels, but for one economic unit. And you agree that there's no physical change in the site from the time they purchased it to when the merger occurred.
Agreed.
Is there anything that precluded the developer from developing the site as two roll numbers as opposed to one?
I am not sure, to be honest.
So would you agree then that it doesn't quite make sense that the value would increase just because of the city decided to merge two roll numbers?
I believe that there would, if these are two separate lots and we had them as two separate lots, I'm not aware of exactly the rules regarding what he can build over two lots as opposed to having one, but from my understanding, it's what's the word? It's maybe easier or to build when you have it as one, when you get it, I forget the word, not subdivided, but the opposite merged, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So in my opinion, it's worth more, yes.
Okay,
I'm not,
I-
but I'm
I
not,
just-
again, I'm not sure of the exact rules of if you own the two lots. I'm guessing at this point.
Yeah, so again, my question, that you're not aware of any reason that would preclude the developer from having developed the site when it was two roll numbers?
Not
Like,
specifically,
We see many
no.
examples of
Yeah.
that, correct, where there's multiple roll numbers combined into one economic unit. Yeah, that's all the questions.
Thank you. Mr. Buss?
Yes. The subject property was a gas station prior to it becoming vacant,
I'm not
is
sure.
that correct? Do you know what your four sales, have they been developed?
I believe so, if you wanna go over them. 2470 Main, they believe they subdivided it, and on the north side, they added one of those tangerine banks, those little trailer, almost like a trailer unit, buildings. 250 Marion, I believe they made residential apartments. 755 Henderson, they turned into a business center, from my understanding. And 1328 Plessis, I am not sure if it is just a vacant land still or not. It was originally had a residential on it, but I'm not sure if they've built on it since.
And the one on Marion Street was a gas station as well?
I'm not aware of what it was before.
And that sale, the sale was mentioned in June 2015, but I missed it. Do you know?
I don't know anything about
That
it.
was your information, okay. That's all my questions.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Ms. McMahon?
I think my questions have been answered.
So, these were originally two pieces of land. Mr. Buss has just asked, there was a gas station on one, what was the other?
I'm not aware of what it was before.
Not aware. Okay. And I'm sorry, when was the sale?
I don't know. I believe July 6, 2013.
Okay,
14,
14.
June 6, 14.
Okay,
okay,
I'm not aware.
good. Confirm that. Okay. Thank you, that's all my questions. Would you like to give your presentation?
We also have the rebuttal
Sure.
evidence. So I'll hand this out first.
Thank you.
So I put together a rebuttal on the comparables here presented by the assessor. And I have them in order of the way they were presented. On the first page, if you open it up, I have 2470 Main Street. Firstly, I'll just mention, in general, these comparables are superior to the subject property because of their locations are superior. They're also all somewhat smaller than the subject property. Firstly, 2470 Main Street, you can see a picture of it on the first page here. It's located along Main Street, which is a major arterial road. There's, you can see in this picture, there's a large area of commercial development, including a Shoppers Drug Mart, restaurants, strip malls, a large amount of green space, and gas stations. As the assessor had mentioned, amenities, close proximity to amenities generally commands a higher market value. We also took a look at the 2015 traffic flow map from the City of Winnipeg in the Public Works Department. As according to that map, this location has approximately 38,000 vehicles per day, which is much higher than the subject property, which has about 24,600 vehicles per day. It's also 28% smaller than the subject property, which would account for a higher price per square foot. If you go to page 3, that's the second comparable property. It's 250 Marion Street. This location is far superior to the subject property. It's directly adjacent to a major supermarket and an assortment of other amenities, including a credit union and a bank, strip malls, restaurants. It's along a large commercial strip, zoned commercial. According to the 2015 traffic flow map, Marion and Goulet combined have approximately 36,200 vehicles per day, much higher than the subject property at 24,600, and the property is 30% smaller than that of the subject property. I should also note that this property, it's in a suitable location to have first floor retail on the main floors of the property, based on being in a very walkable neighborhood and destination center. The next, page 4, 755 Henderson Highway. It's located, at the time of sale, it was located across the street from a major supermarket, one street over from a community center. So those are major amenities for a community. Also, Henderson Highway has, according to the 2015 traffic flow map, 35,900 vehicles per day, much higher than the subject property at 24,600. And is 14% smaller than the subject property. 1328 Plessis on page 5, that was comparables number 4 and 5. This property is located at the corner of Regent and Plessis with a small, very narrow lot in front of it. It's a prime location that's surrounded by an assortment of amenities, including a hotel, a giant tiger that's about 250 meters away. It has, at that corner, there's 53,000 vehicles per day, and the lot is 17% smaller than the subject property. Given this information, we believe that all the comparables that were used are far superior than the subject property.
Thank you. Did you want to ask any questions in regards to this rebuttal?
No, I have no questions.
And Mr. Bess?
No questions in regard to the rebuttal.
So all of these comparables have a higher price per square foot right now, in the, which you're suggesting is, reflects the fact that they're all smaller lots.
And the three main points is they're all smaller lots, they're all have greater traffic volume, and they all have greater amenities.
Correct. However, the values that are shown here, these are all old, quite a bit older sales, except for two of them, right? And so, would you agree that these actual sale prices per square foot would, if they were at the reference date, be significantly higher?
I'm sorry.
If these sales are older, like 2010,
Mhm.
if they were 2014, would they not be higher? Again?
I believe the assessor had made a time adjustment.
No, I
Not
don't
on
think
these,
so.
no time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He hasn't made any time adjustment?
These comparables were presented by the assessor, so I'd refer that to the assessor for, we would agree to a time adjustment, however, suggesting that they would be higher than what, per square foot than what they are
All right,
presented as.
thank you.
And I don't have any questions.
Okay.
So if you'd like to proceed with your presentation?
Sure. If you open it up, so 2016 and 2017, as the assessor had mentioned, this lot, opening up to page 1, and I have a photo of the lot there, it was combined from two former lots that were combined when they were purchased they were purchased together June 1st, 2014 for $350,000. As you can see in the property site map, that's on page 3 of the report. This is at the corner of Archibald's and Elizabeth. It's also adjacent to single-family detached homes. And if you open to page 4, I have a description of the property. So I should note that this property was purchased by the developer with the intent to create a multifamily dwelling. With the developer had put together a plan that was presented to the Board of Adjustment in May 2016 with the intention of producing a multifamily residence dwelling of 12,271 square feet, 36 suites, 29 interior parking stalls, and 24 exterior stalls. This is what the developer had in mind when he purchased this property in 2014. However, when it was presented, this was rejected because of several reasons. Firstly, in January 2016, City Council had adopted some setback rules from rail yards. As you can see, if you go back to page 2 or 3, property site map, the property is adjacent to a rail line there. And council had adopted a recommended setback of 30 meters for any development from rail lines in January 2016. So this was after the developer had purchased the property and before this plan was submitted for approval to the Board of Adjustment. Given that information and the fact that it's zoned C2, the planner's report at that time had recommended, and this information, by the way, is all in the appendix, at the end of the appendix. The planner's report had suggested that it not be approved without having, because the initial plan, had residential on the main floor, which was not permitted in C2, and the site plan did not include the full setback of 30 meters. Given this information, I'm sorry, there's one more point, is there was significant community opposition, in part because this development would impose shadows on adjacent properties, which was presented at the hearing. So for 3 reasons, it was rejected at the Board of Adjustment, and the profitability potential of this property from the developer's perspective had significantly reduced. Again, he purchased it for $350,000 in 2014. Had he known that the profitability would be less, he would have purchased it for less. And that's what the developer has told us. The resulting footprint size is reduced from 12,271 square feet to 10,247 square feet. Instead of 36 suites, it's reduced to 30 suites. And the main floor, instead of residential, is now parking, which includes 29 exterior stalls and 19 interior stalls, reduced from 24 exterior and 29 interior. So the property has had a significant reduction in profitability. I should also mention a key point is that the initial plan by the developer was to include underground parking, but because of the setback rules from the rail line that was passed by council after he had purchased it, he was not able to provide the space for a ramp leading to underground parking. So that eliminated the option for underground parking. I've proposed, just give me one second, sorry. As the assessor had mentioned, there was no physical change when these properties were combined, which triggered the supplementary assessment. And when the board had previously, a Board of Revision had previously determined the values of this property for 2016 and 17 cycle at $496,000 combined. I've proposed several comparable sales. If you move to page 6, I have 8 comparables, and all these are of a range of assessed square feet surrounding mostly similar, fairly similar to the subject property or a little bit more, which we have adjusted for. If you go through the sales, skip to page 15, we proposed a time adjustment of 0.625% per month, which is 15% over a 2-year cycle, which we realized is more than the city assessor had applied. The range of sales, given this information, we had was between $6.80 per square foot and $14.29 per square foot. The average sale price was $10.17 per square foot, with a median of $10.21 per square foot. I should note that all these comparables have in general more traffic volumes and amenities that closer reflect that of the subject property. And just 1 second, sorry. Given this information, we're willing to accept an assessed value of $496,000, which was what the Board of Revision had agreed to prior to prior to the consolidation of these properties. And that's $10.57 per square foot.
No, that's the sale price.
Or sorry,
That's what they purchased.
they purchased it for $10.57 per square foot. Sorry, so it's an assessed value of $14.98 per square foot.
Thank you. Any questions?
I have no questions.
Mr. Bass?
Was it merged after the sale? The person, but your client, I guess, bought the property as two pieces and put it together after the purchase?
It was purchased to be combined, do you know?
Well, they purchased it as one economic unit. The purchaser didn't care it was on two roll numbers. They bought it as one economic unit. The city simply made an internal move to combine them.
Okay, it wasn't two separate, yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
nothing changed as far as the legal or physical state of the property. It was simply an internal move on the city's part to merge them.
So they put forth a plan to put 36 units on, and they were denied, and they will be allowed 30 units, is that?
Yes. And again, that's because of the reduction in.
From the rail line.
Exactly.
Are they going ahead with that, do you know?
Yes, they are.
That's all my questions.
Thank you.
Your comparables, quite a number of them are significantly larger than this particular lot.
Mhm.
And would that not, they would have a much lower per square footage cost?
Yes, and we made a significant upward adjustment to reflect that. From, as I mentioned, the average was $10.17 per square foot.
Right?
We made an adjustment to $14.98 per square
And
foot.
that's to reflect the difference in sizes?
Yes.
As well as the time? You've already adjusted the time within the $10, correct?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. That's my question.
I'm sorry, did you state that the owner, the present owner is going to proceed with the development
Yes,
to the best of your knowledge? Just looking on page 4 of your brief, it talks about Imperial Oil, that they had to excavate the site because it was a former gas station, that there could still possibly be contamination.
I'm not sure of the,
Yeah, I spoke to the owners about that issue, and at the time that we had presented the appeals to the Board of Revision in 2015 for the two separate roll numbers, there was the risk, because it was a fresh site for the owner. He was concerned that, this was a gas station before. The site was remediated to provincial standards. Provincial standards, though, sometimes aren't to market standards, so he was concerned. But since then, they found that there was no concern, so they proceeded.
Okay. I have no further questions.
If I may just make a last statement in summary, if it's okay with the assessor as well.
Sure, did you want to leave it for the 2018, or you want to leave, or, go ahead.
Well, that's a good point. Maybe we can wait till the end of the 18th, because it covers both.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, try and get it.
I know.
Right here. Okay.
Okay.
I got the right one.
Mr. Spacek, if you'd like to lead us through the 2018.
All right, we're now looking at the 2018 roll number. Again, moving 2 years forward, using the reference date of April 1st, 2016 now for this one. I'll just, I guess I'll say the new value for 18 is 616,000. This is a 14% increase over our 2016 we just looked at. Same size lot. I will save all the fluff as everything is the same. My pictures up to page 3, same zoning, page 4. Page 5, there's just a few changes. I've tried to put together more recent comparables using the new reference date, so everything is, again, more up to date for this assessment cycle. I will point out, I'm using 740 Archibald. It's the closest, most recent sale I could find to the subject property. Again, 68,000 square feet, so it's much larger than the subject property. It was sold June 15. Sale price of $19.32 per square foot, time adjusted at $20.28. I will point out this one, out of all my comparables, it is zoned commercial multi-use, so CMU. So the rest are C2 like the subject property. This one has more utility. It has what I'll say a better zoning. So again, can be attributed to a higher sale price and more utility on the site. I just want to point that out. The rest of my comparables, I used 2033 Henderson, which was sold January 15. It sold for $36 a square foot. Again, time adjusted to 40. 2470 Main Street is sold May 13. This is a smaller lot, 23,000. Sold for 2315. I'm using that same comparable, from before. 250 Marion sold November 13 for $25.81 a square foot. Again, 3230 for the time adjusted price per square foot. And then 373 Marion sold in June 14. It's a 34,000, so very close in size, sold for $30 a square foot, time adjusted for $35.62. So I will point out our subject property, the rent went from up to $18.60, so again, $2.35 higher than our last appeal at a 14% increase, which again, in my opinion, the price of the land has gone up between April 1st, 14 to 16. 14% increase seems fair in my eyes. If you have any questions about this one, please let me know.
Thank you. Any questions?
I don't believe so. Do you have any questions?
There's no comparison to it.
I have a rebuttal to present as well.
Okay.
Once I have the opportunity.
Sure. We'll just finish with the questions first.
So no
one
questions.
Mr. Buss?
740 Archibald, that's the closest sale. Although it is large, what goes on there? Do you know?
I believe they built a residential unit. Again, I'm
Yeah, that's-
pretty sure.
yeah.
Sorry, I'm not confident, I don't.
That's all my questions.
Thank you.
I have no questions.
And I have no questions, so if you'd like to start to your land.
So if you open this up, the rebuttal report to page 2, the first land sales comparison. 740 Archibald. It's in a similar location as in, it's not too far, it's on Archibald. However, there are a few things that, as you had mentioned, as the assessor had mentioned, make it superior to the subject property. Particularly, this was on CMU, commercial mixed use. In the zoning bylaw, this does allow for residential to be permitted on the first floor, unlike C2. And that was a key difference in between this and the subject property, which allowed for more a greater footprint of units. It also was of a size that permitted a ramp for underground parking, which again made this parcel a lot more economically viable than the subject property. I'll switch to the second comparable, 2033 Henderson Highway. This one, while it has similar traffic levels as the subject property, it's in a much more desirable location, being adjacent to Buns Creek and the Buns Creek Greenway. Buns Creek Greenway. And it overlooks quite a scenic view. It's also at the end of a commercial strip on Henderson, where it's adjacent to a strip mall and various other retail activity. The next one's 2470 Main Street. That's on page 4. and 250 Marion Street. I had covered those previously as they were used in the 2016 and 2017 comparables. Again, these both have significantly more traffic than the subject property, a much greater amount of amenities than that of the subject property, and both are significantly smaller. That's 28% smaller and 30% smaller than the subject property. And lastly, if you go to the final page, page 6, 373 Marion Street. This comparable was also significantly superior. It's in a very desirable location. It was developed into an A&W drive-through, which has access, because of the size and nature of the parcel, has access from both Marion and Goulet Street, and it's just 160 feet away from Desmiron Street. So it's at a sort of a right in the middle of a three-way intersection, or three major streets, with a combined traffic value of 45,500 vehicles per day. That's 32,800 directly, and then for 12,700 from Desmiron's. It's also surrounded by an assortment of other commercial development and amenities. And that concludes my rebuttal.
Thank you,
I have no questions on the rebuttal.
thank you. Mr. Buss?
Would 373 Marion have been suitable for an apartment building, like a condominium, like the subject property is planning?
I mean, possibly, but it's beside retailers, restaurants, a hotel. It appears it might be a lot more viable to have a commercial development, as it was zoned commercial. I think it was C2.
That's all my questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
I don't have any questions.
Just have one quick question. You talk about the development on 740 Archibald, that it's got, it's going to have this underground parking that you had spoken about, that the subject property was not going to be able to obtain. What sort of
Yes.
parking are they going to have? Has that issue been resolved?
Well, what they decided to do was, because the first floor cannot have residential units,
Right.
they put parking on the first floor. And so some of the parking's outside, it's a surface parking lot, and some is inside, on the main floor.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions. If you'd like to go on to your presentation.
Okay. If you open it up. So I'm not going to go over the placement. One second, should I just come here?
Yeah, nothing's different.
Yeah, nothing's different about the physical, so I'm just gonna jump straight to the comparables sales. Firstly, I want to point out, I made an error in one of the dates here, so if you could correct that. If you go to page 6, I have sales comparables there. And the first one, which is 740 Archibald, there were 2 sales dates, and this one should say May 22nd, 2014. There was another sale June 18th, 2015, and that is the wrong one. So please update the date to May 22nd, 2014. So I have 5 comparable sales. The first one, as I had mentioned, is a superior property, but I put it because it's a similar style development and in general proximity to the subject property. The remaining comparables I thought were very well reflective of the subject property, because they are all in similar locations in terms of traffic and in terms of level of amenities nearby. 1406 Plessis Road is probably the highest highest level of amenities, and you can see that reflected in the time adjusted price per square foot. If you flip to page, as you can see, I'm just going to go through the comparables. All of these comparables, three of these comparables were developed into similar style multi-residential buildings. That's comparables 1, 2, and 5 is under, I'm not sure if it's begun yet, but there was a plan approved for that. If you skip to page 12, I show a chart, more information about the comparables. We applied a time adjustment of 15% over a 2-year period, which is about 0.625% per month. And given this information, the sales range is between $11.72 per square foot and $17.27 per square foot. While sales number 1 and 2 have had similar developments as that proposed as the subject property, we feel that the best is comparable 3 because it is closer in size to the subject property relative to the comparables. It also similarly has a similar level of amenities nearby and traffic volume. While the average of the comparables is $14.02 per square foot, we propose an upward adjustment to reflect the size difference, as most of these comparables are larger than the subject property, to $15.50 per square foot, which is a total value of $513,200. And that's it.
Thank you. Mr. Spatchik, any questions?
I have no questions on this one, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Best?
Yes, the sale on St. Mary's Road that you said was the best comparable, is that, that's on page 9, it was developed into a 2-story office building?
Yes.
Is that because they weren't allowed to build condominiums, or you know anything about that?
Just 1 second. I'm not aware of that. I know it was zoned C1. The subject property was zoned C2, and they developed multi-residential, so I don't see any reason why they couldn't have developed multi-residential on St. Mary's Road.
I'm sorry, I missed your credentials at the beginning. Did you say you worked for the city? Or
No,
you were
no,
a
no.
city planner? or
No,
something?
I formerly worked as a city planner.
Oh, okay. Formerly.
Yeah.
That's all my questions. Thanks.
Thank you.
For the previous request was for about $496,000. You're saying that in the 2 years it's increased in value to $513,000. That's what you're asking for this time, right?
Yes.
What percentage increase is
I'd have to do the math.
Those numbers?
496 to 513. Um, 3.5%.
3.5%. However, on your time adjusted sales, you're saying that land and values have increased by about 15% over the 2 years?
Yes. Yeah, anything to add?
Yeah, the only reason we're choosing the 496 on the 2016 assessment is because that's what the Board of Revision actually applied, and nothing's changed at the site except to the negative. Originally, we were proposing a lower value, so it's simply to be consistent with what the board had applied last time. Our original assumption was it should be lower. The owner would probably suggest that as well, but he accepted our position. So
So
If
this
anything, we-
513 then would be probably closer to what the actual increase, to a 15% increase over what you were originally asking then.
That's
Is that what
correct,
you're
because
suggesting?
the 513 isn't based on any previous board decisions, that's based on evidence.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much.
And I have no questions. Do you require a summation, either of you?
I don't, but he can, I believe he wants to do one.
Yeah, I would, Madam Chair, if you don't mind. I think both Mr. Spacek and Mr. Lennon did an excellent job of comparable analysis on the properties. But I think it's important to remember that these properties sell based on a residual value. People buy the properties with proposed development, they figure out what the profitability is, and then they're willing to pay a certain amount for the land based on that development. And that's important to remember when we're looking at some of these comparisons, because it's very easy to get skewed when looking at comparisons and forget that the subject property has an arm's length sale that the developers had paid for the site, very close to the reference date. And they're very astute businessmen. We didn't see any evidence that any of the comparisons had been sidetracked from their previous, or from their proposed developments. In fact, most of them are now currently in their proposed development state. What this means is that a site that otherwise looks very similar can be worth a lot more if the development potential allows it to have a better development, as Mike was saying. Higher traffic, amenities around it, location of having a park beside it, all these things will add to the desirability of the units or the commercial development, depending. And that will really drive the value of the site. So economies of scale even can be skewed with land. It's usually a fairly black and white concept, but with land, of course, a very small site has very little development potential, so one would think small site's better, but not with land. It's almost more of a Goldilocks theory. It has to be just right for what you want to do. So I think we have to be cognizant of the actual sale price, $350,000. If anything, things have got worse since that date. The development potential got worse. And if the developer was paying for the site again, they would have probably paid less than $350,000. But we're asking the board to consider the values that they had established already with no changes to the site for 2016-17 and a slightly higher value for 2018. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. And you don't want to,
Thank you.
okay, thank you. Leave it with us.
Yeah, it's nice to see you again.
Yeah, you too.
Alex.
Thank you.
Bye.
I got a muffin now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
See you, Mike.
Good morning, Ms. Bedker. Morning. And you were here to talk about Sage Creek.
Yes.
Actually, sorry, just before we begin, does anybody need to take a quick break or you're okay?
I'm okay till 10:25.
Okay. She's usually.
Can you stick your phone in?
I'm just worried those muffins might be gone.
Yeah.
Take a break after this. Snafu.
Yeah, we just got two left here.
So whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you. Today we're looking at 103 Sage Creek Boulevard. 2000, we'll start with the 16 and 17 roll years for the first appeal year. Total value of $2,874,000. This is a vacant commercial land. Land area is 138,747 square feet. This is when you first drive into Sage Creek on the north side of the street. You'll see I've included pictures on page 2. Take a look here. Page 3, I've included the zoning and the map showing the zoning around it. So mostly C2 around it with some residential beside it. Again, C2, same as our last appeal. I won't get too deep into that. Page 4 shows our cost valuation. And the important page here is page 5, if you take a peek at my sale comparables. I'll bring up some history on the property. This was done, we did the zoning change from, it used to be the rural residential, like Sage Creek, the whole area was residential. Now this has been determined to be commercial, so we changed our internal parameters on it to make it commercial land as opposed to residential, since they're going to be building commercial on it, so that's what brought up this sub-notice. Again, I've put together, again, we're looking at April 1st, 2014 for this appeal, so I had to use older land sales, which can be, to be honest, can be tougher to find. So you can see I found 2 within Sage Creek, which is nice. We have one, my first one is a large land size of, if you look at it, 530,000. So this one was across the street from it, kitty corner. I've included pictures of these as well on the next pages if you want to take a look. But this larger parcel sold in July 11, so this is 3 years before the reference date. And it sold for $11.23 a square foot. 27 Sage Creek, which is now zoned C2 as well. This is a smaller land size unit, this is only 53,000 square feet, and it sold for $12.16 a square foot. I included 2 other comparables that I could find, which I tried to find similar land size, so they're at the 113 and 115,000 square feet. This is out at Bison Drive, 70 and 50. They both sold July 11th, and the sale prices range from $12.46 to $17.63. Again, all of my sales were in June and July of 11. The reference date was April 1st, 2014, so I would argue that there should be an upward adjustment of these rents. That would bring us closer to our actual rate we're using on the subject property, which is $20.71. This is model generated rate for land for this unit. I've included pictures of all these comparables if you have any questions on them. You can see the first 2 in Sage Creek and the other 2 at Bison Drive. If you have any questions, please let me know. That's my presentation.
Thank you. Questions?
Yes. So you pointed out that the first of your comparables is much larger, but you would agree that the second one is also much smaller than the subject? And although they're older sales, have you provided any sort of evidence to suggest what a specific time adjustment might be?
No, I haven't.
So your $20.71 per square foot is considerably higher than any of the sales that you've provided?
It is.
No other questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Best?
Have these sales, these comparables of yours being redeveloped?
Yeah, you can see on my page 6, the 50 Sage Creek. I don't know if you've been to Sage Creek recently, where you drive, and it's got, I believe, a Sobeys. It has a bunch of residential units. You can kind of see on my picture there the buildings that they've built along the road. I believe there's a McDonald's there and stuff. So the one's been built, and the smaller unit, 27, I'm not sure exactly what they developed there, but they did develop.
Is that fire hall?
Yeah, I believe it is the fire hall there.
And then Bison Drive, those ones?
Yeah, they built residential units, I believe, apartments.
Multifamily?
I believe so, yes.
So the closest in size are actually the Bison Drive ones.
Yeah.
That's all my questions.
I have no further questions.
And I have no questions. What is yours, Rebecca?
Thank you. Since the assessor's already gone over the details of the property, we can just flip to page 5, which shows the comparables that we've selected. So, again, we agree there's not a huge number of land sales. So we have ones ranging back from 2011 upwards to 2014. Some are, similar in area, some are similar in size. And we see a range of values per square foot. You can see the source notes, so where we got those sales from, and some notes if they have been developed. We also note that previously for 2016, we had argued for 550 Sterling Lion, which would be considered much higher or much more superior location. It's in Seasons of Tuxedo, and using these similar comparisons, the board used a value of $11 per square foot. That decision is included in the appendix of this. So given that, and given what was applied by the board to the Seasons of Tuxedo land, We've applied $11 per square foot. So turning to the next page, you can see applying $11 to the square foot area results in a rounded market value of $1,533,000, which is still a significant increase from the original value pre-sub of $192,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
I have no
Mr.
questions.
Butts?
I'm sorry, like that. So you're asking for, what is the value that you're asking for?
$1,533,000. It's on page 6.
Are any of those sales on, oh, I see, $11 per square foot. Are any of the sales that you presented on page 5, are they time adjusted?
No, we haven't adjusted anything.
Are they, that's all my questions.
I have no question.
So you've included in your brief the Board of Revision order on Sterling Lion Parkway?
That's correct, yes.
Sorry, just trying to catch up here. So that came in at $11.
That's correct.
And you feel that's your best comparison?
I just feel that in addition to the other comparisons, which the average is 1088, and given that Seasons came in at 11, I still feel the Seasons is superior to the subject property, so I feel $11 is fair.
Thank you. We'll proceed to 2018.
Sounds good, thank you. Again, we're looking at 103 Sage Creek Boulevard, the exact same parcel of vacant commercial land. 2018 value this time, using the reference date of April 1st, 2016, is $3,293,000. It's a 14.5% increase over our last appeal we just heard. Again, same square footage, 138,747. I've included the same pictures on page 2, same zoning on page 3, total value on page 4. And if you turn to page 5, I use a couple of the similar comparisons in Sage Creek, which are old sales for this reference date, but I felt it was important to keep them in here. And then I've added a few more sales as of the reference date. So December 31st, 2014, 70 Shady Shores sold for $17.38, is a $40,000 land, 40,000 square foot parcel, smaller than our subject property, but close by off of Dugald. And time adjusted sale price as of the reference date of $19.63. And I've added 2 more at the bottom. My 4th and 5th comparable are Center and 50 Center. So these are in sales of land within the Bridgewater, the development on the south side of the city, which is similar to Sage Creek in many ways. Again, these are some large land size sales. So number 4, my 4th comparable is 435,000 square feet, which is larger than subject property, sold for $17.22 a square foot, time adjusted to $18.53. And if you look at my last comparable, 50 Center, this is the most comparable in size, sold May 14, and it was 135,000 square feet of vacant land in Bridgewater, and it sold for $23.68 a square foot. Again, time adjusted for $28.26. So I believe these are good comparables to look at to give you an idea what vacant land is selling for within newer subdivisions. And just to point out under that is our land valuation, so the square foot, price per square foot has went up to $23.73 for the 18 assessment. So if you have any questions about that, please let me know. I've included pictures of all the comparables and the other pages if you want to take a look. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
Yes, so again, you've already pointed out that 2 of your sale comparisons are considerably smaller than subject.
Yes.
Do you have any evidence or support for your time adjustment of your sale prices?
No, I haven't brought it.
And do you think that time adjusting a sale from 2011 would make sense?
Yes.
It's quite the large time adjustment over time.
Yes.
No other questions?
Thank you. Mr. Best?
So 50 Center, that's a picture on page 8.
You can see there. Yeah, 50 Center is on page 8 there.
That was developed into is it a convenience store, a gas station?
Yeah, I believe
car
gas bar station garage, yeah.
So although it's, in terms of distance, it's a ways away, but it would be, do you consider it to be a similar type situation as the subject?
Yeah, I just believe that out of the land sales we do have, finding one within a newer development, it was useful.
Could they put a gas station and convenience store on the subject property?
I don't know what the, 50 Center, the zoning was, C2, same as the subject property, so I imagine, but I don't know what requirements are in place for a gas station, but it has the same zone, so I believe it, there's no reason it couldn't.
That's all my questions. Madam Chair.
I have no additional questions, Gary.
And I have none either. Would you like to proceed?
You can just turn to page 5. So this shows the comparisons that we used to arrive at our value. We did not adjust for time. So again, we have some that are sort of from the area and some that are from newer development, and some on Sterling Lion. So we believe that Sage Creek and the Sterling Lion properties are superior again to the subject property. It's by Keniston Commons, it's by Seasons of Tuxedo. There's a huge traffic count down Keniston to Bishop that Sage Creek might not necessarily see. The average of the sales we provided here is $12.18. Given that we feel confident in the $11 from last cycle, we've applied the $12 to this cycle. So on page 6, you can see we've applied the $12 per square foot for rounded market value of $1,673,000. And again, in the notes on the sale comparisons, it shows what each of the properties has been developed into if a development has happened. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a quick question, you said your sales were not time adjusted?
They're not.
Okay, and you believe there would be, could be an increase in value if we were looking at April 1st, 2016 for land sales compared to 11, 12, and 14?
Yeah.
Thank you, that's all my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Best?
The comparable on Keniston, that's 1376. That's a huge piece of land. Is there some economies of scale there? Should we be?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a superior location, but it is a larger parcel. So, I mean, there's going to be some attributes on any of these properties that are going to be either inferior or superior, which would warrant either an increase or a decrease in the per square foot price in comparison to our subject property.
How about the Rothwell one? That's similar in size. Has that been developed?
That one's now a vehicle dealership.
Okay. That one's at 1380. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Questions, Lana?
I have no questions.
I have no questions either. Do either of you wish a chance for a submission?
No, thank you.
I'm okay.
Okay. Is Becky here presenting on Pembina?
Yes, sir.
Actually, the pictures
Can you state your full name, please?
Matthew Stephen Brokers.
Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
And good morning, Mr. Barakas, if you'd proceed when you're ready.
All right, roll number 0309299655, 1833 Pembina Highway, parcel use Resap, one building, 7 stories, built in 72, effective year built 1999, 140 suites, 58 indoor parking stalls, 99 outdoor parking stalls, construction class B reinforced concrete frame. If you go to page 3, you'll see our income and expense breakdown. Gross potential rent of $1,731,912, with a 42.91% expense ratio, comes out with a net operating income of $961,063, 5% cap rate for a capitalized income rounded value of $19,221,000. If you go to page 4, you'll see our rental comparables here. Our rental comparables, one is newer in terms of effective year built, the other 3 are older. You'll notice that the average monthly rent of the subject property falls within that of the rent comparables. Property was renovated, just going back to the effective year built put on it. It had some renovations done in 2011. There's a permit for $2.2 million. Electrical, kitchen, bathroom renovations. Exterior alterations include window replacement. So the place had some significant work done to it, hence the effective age. 5 is just our cap rate chart. 7 is the income and expense statement 2015 of the subject property, including the rent roll at the back. So just glancing ahead, it looks like predominantly like we're about 1,000 off in terms of net operating income here. So it's predominantly a cap rate issue. The property is performing well in terms of vacancy levels being quite low, less than 1% in the most recent year. So with the renovations done, it's filled up. It's performing well. That's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Baker, questions?
Sure. Can you tell me how the city comes up with its effective age that it applied to this particular property?
Someone would have gone out and inspected it after the permit and then just made a judgment based on the renovations.
And if the property were 1998 instead of 1999, it would have a different cap rate, is that correct?
Sure. Yeah, if it was 1997, it would have been 5 1/4, but I'm sure whoever did it looked at the income and expenses that were received post renovation and deemed that a 5% cap was necessary.
And then just with regards to your cap rates, you have no actual direct evidence to support your cap rates provided?
That's correct.
No other questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bess?
When were the improvements done?
The permit was taken out June of 2011, so 11, maybe the beginning of 12.
And it was for the permit was for 2.2 million?
2.2 million.
Thank you.
The rental rates you're using here are model driven?
Yes.
And you didn't actually inspect this property with someone else?
No, someone did, but
Yeah.
when the renovations were done, but not me.
Thank you.
So these rentals were done in 2011, and what did they involve again?
Permit says here, electrical kitchen, bathroom renovations, exterior alterations to include window replacement. There's some flooring done as well. Basically, got some pictures, I'm pretty sure. It's like the whole interior was done. And there's some exterior work as well. Kitchen cabinets, bathroom vanities and whatnot. So it's been renovated. New showers, new toilets.
And as you stated, you yourself did not inspect the property.
I did not.
Can you tell me the cross street that this is located on in Pembina?
Between Adamar and Plaza.
And you don't have an exterior view?
There's one in the appellant's brief.
Okay. Can you tell me where Kearney, on your comparisons on page 4, where Kearney Street is?
Kearney Street? It's off of St. Mary's.
So, and sorry, to the best of your knowledge, this would have been inspected after the renos were done?
Yes.
That's all my questions. If you'd like to proceed. Thank you.
So there's a photo of the subject property on page 1, and a map of the location is given on page 2. So this property had a small section of land. It's removed from the back of the property, and that's the whole reason why there was a supplementary issued for 2018. The original 2018 value and the supplementary value were at the same. We originally had the 2018 appealed, but because of the actual land and hence legal change, that's the whole reason of this supplementary. So the renovations occurred quite some time ago in 2011 to 12. So the appeal isn't due to the renovations. The supplementary is due to just this chunk of land being removed. Turning to page 4, there's just a little blurb there about the effective age. So this property underwent renovations in 11 and 12. So new kitchens, flooring, bathrooms, and some new air makeup systems. After that, the effective age changed from 1972 to 1999, which is 27 years. I mean, an air makeup system is a structural change, but no structural changes were made to the actual building itself. And while we do believe that an upward adjustment to the age is probably warranted given these changes, we don't feel 27 years is the right number. And the burden of proof to show that much of an age adjustment is on the assessment department to show that. So we still consider this property to be in that age category of 1960 to 1998. Turning to the final page then. We've used the income from 2015 with the market vacancy. For the expenses over 3 years, we've averaged professional fees, office supplies, advertising, waste and snow and repair and maintenance, which came in at $642 a suite. Our net operating income comes in just slightly higher than the city's at $962, $653. So the main difference here is the cap rate. So for the age category that we feel that this property belongs to, we apply a 5.5% cap rate, so our rounded market value is then 17,503,000. And then, of course, with the cap rate study, I know we've all heard it before, so if you'd like, I can give you a brief overview, or I'm happy to leave it with you since I know you've all heard this.
Thank you. Questions, Mr. Barras?
So you bumped the vacancy, it says the average vacancy on your last page was 0.5%, and you bumped it to 2.8%?
Yeah, typically we'll always use the market as a minimum, and then adjust higher if it consistently is higher vacancy over a number of years.
So, would you agree there's a higher demand for this property than the market level?
It is near the university, so that could be a draw for additional tenants.
When you adjusted the vacancy up, did you make any adjustments to the utilities, hydro, water, and gas down to recognize that there'd be less people using these?
No, I did not.
$2.2 million worth of rentals, would you say that's a significant amount of money spent on renovating the place?
It is. I know in some cases, with this particular property manager, they have spent money on renos for things like a new air makeup system, thinking that that will perhaps reduce their costs, and I know in some of their cases it hasn't. So it is a significant amount. Whether it all necessarily contributes to the value of the building, probably not.
So with RM at 642, just looking at your cap rate, sales, I've got the R&Ms written down for them. This building shows lower R&M than all of these sales here. Would you say that it's in better condition than these sales?
A lot of our sales were renovated as well. So I think that it's probably in a similar condition to them.
Those are my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Buss?
Have you inspected any of the suites in this
No,
building? That's all my questions.
I don't have any further questions.
And I don't have any further questions. No.
You're making water, right?
Are you fine? Well,
We're both freezing.
You're what? You're freezing?
Yes.
You want my crown?
I got extra coats maybe, I should just do it. Oh, I'm sweating, but
And
it's.
I'm never freezing.
No, no, it's fine.
No?
Are you sick, Mr. Rico?
No, I got a new workout though with the crutches. It's an upper body workout.
Can you state your full name, please?
Rocking your phone.
Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Mr. Ruckus, whenever you're ready.
$795. Sterling Line Parkway, roll number 10006775950. Ooh, it's the wrong year in front of me. 2017. 2017, reference date April 1st, 2014. Parcel use code Res App, one building, 4 stories. Actual year built 2016, 68 suites, 52 indoor parking stalls, 62 outdoor parking stalls. Construction class D. If you go to page 2, see request for income information. That's blank because this place is new, so what we're looking at precedes the roll year, so we didn't have the information at that time. Page 3 shows our breakdown here. We've got our average monthly rent at $1,429.81. Gross potential rent, $1,166,725. 2.2% vacancy. Effective gross income, $1,141,057. With our 36.87 expense ratio, a cap rate of 5 comes out with estimated rounded market value of $14,407,000. If you go to page 4, here are our rental comps. Built in 2016, like I said before, we have our average monthly rent here at $1,429.81. So average, looking at the 4 comps here, the rent falls within the range of the comparables. It's newer. It also has some 3-bedroom units, whereas only 2 of the rental comps have 3-bedroom units. Also, because we didn't have any data, any pre-reference data, I took a peek at the income and expense ratio, the expense ratio of these newer buildings from the 2013 income and expense statements. So for this subject, we got 36.87% on the income and expense ratio, and that falls in line with the 4 comparable expense ratios as well. Page 5 is our cap rate table. Page 7, that's just the permit. Total project value, $12.5 million to build the place. And then page 8 onward, there's some pictures of the place. So on Sterling Line out by IKEA. So it's an L-shaped building, and what it is, it's attached to another apartment building, which is 785 Sterling Line. So from our notes here, like on page 10, the gym, you see, and on page 9, or rather, page 12, the upstairs roof patio that actually, that falls on the 785 property. But it's, according to our notes, the tenants of 795 have access to those amenities. Just clarifying that. So it shows some pictures of the inside. It's new, high quality. Out by the IKEA and the outlet malls there. So again, it would have been nice to have pre-reference state income and expense information, but that stuff is not admissible. So as the rents fall in line with comps and the expense ratio, that's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Dupuis?
Yeah, so we're dealing with the 2017 supplemental right now? Is that correct? Okay. Did you eventually receive, or have you received information from the owner, mailers, questionnaires, income and expense, subsequent to this, or at any time?
Yeah, afterwards.
You did?
Yeah.
And in that information, did they provide you a rent roll?
Yeah, they did. Got it right here.
Okay, and it's probably the same one I have. Did you have a chance to review that rent roll for occupancy dates?
I got some notes in regards to occupancy levels.
Okay.
Says, as of August 2000, okay, sorry, the building started occupying spring 2016. August of 2016 is 54% occupied. July of 2017, it was 84% occupied.
Sorry, August of 16, what was your note? It was what percentage?
54.
54. And you're saying, what was your next date?
July of 2017,
July of 17, yeah.
84% occupied.
Okay.
With 2 vacant units leased for August 1st, 2017.
Okay.
And so the the property was put on the roll for September of 2017.
Okay.
It's been leasing up for over a year.
So at the time it was put on the roll, your notes would indicate a vacancy of 16% then?
Well, September 2017, well, actually, August 1st, 2017, occupancy at 87%, and then they had another month to,
13% vacancy then, and when it was put on the roll.
yeah,
It wasn't 2%, was it?
no.
Okay, and I have, is the rent roll you're looking at dated December 15th, 2017?
No, I have the July one,
July of?
17.
July of 17, okay. Now, when you encounter a situation such as this, where there is a lease up and it's obvious that at the time it was put on the roll that it wasn't at full occupancy, doesn't the department want to consider maybe a higher vacancy rate for the initial lease up period?
I mean, that's something that could be considered.
Okay. And the rents you have indicated, page 3, this is not actual rents, are they? This is a blended rate? Or sorry, this is a market rate that you blended to represent the different unit sizes? Is that correct?
Yeah, this is just the average monthly rent per unit.
Okay. Because your rent roll would indicate, as a matter of fact, that the rents vary from $1,230 as a low to $2,240 as a high, based on whether it's a 1, 2, or 3 bedroom, correct?
Yeah, it's an average rate we use.
Okay. And do you know if your vacancies were the larger units or the smaller units?
I don't know.
Okay. On page 7, you have a permit listed. And you're saying that the project value as declared was $12,500,000?
That's what it says, yes.
And that included the shared multipurpose room, the shared common area, correct? With the shared building?
I don't have that information.
Okay. The page 5, the extent of your capitalization rate information that you brought this panel today?
Yes.
And which row would this be considered in?
So this would be, low rise,
A low rise,
yeah.
okay. Did you inspect this site?
No, I did not.
Are these pictures, these are from their website, I take it?
That is correct.
Those are my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Buss?
On the permit, on page 7, when it says total project value, does that include land sales, purchase of the land, etc.?
I couldn't tell you.
So this declared construction value, 7.5 million, that would be the cost of constructing the building?
I mean, the numbers they put on the permits don't always line up with actuals. Things change as the project goes along.
Yeah, I understand the declared construction value, I just wonder about the total project value, what generally they would include in that. So, it was put on the rolls in 2017, September 2017,
That's correct.
and then it's put on as complete with the standard 2% vacancy.
Mm-hmm.
So from the time they had 54% occupancy going back into August of 16, there was no value put on for
There was,
going back in
it
there?
was just land only.
That's all my questions.
I have a question.
And I have no questions. Mr. Newcroft, the floor is yours.
Thank you. As it's clear, this is a building that's joined with another building, and you can see what the permits say as to cost, and there were some shared costs. So the permits are substantially lower than the assessment. That should give us some indication that there might be a discrepancy here. A major issue that we're dealing with here is the lease up. Now, you can see that if you look at our workup versus the assessor's workup, that our gross income is very similar. And we're using actual 2017 income, and we're not going to backdate it and adjust it downwards. I think it's just a fair indication of value, but considering we tend to be within, let's see, we had put a number of 1,175,000 and the assessor's 1,166,000. So $9,000 apart in income. I think we're on the same page. The major issue is the vacancy, so they've applied their market vacancy. Any building that's new is gonna be a 5-year lease-up period, minimum 5-year, and that's if it's a decent project. Many projects that have miscalculated their the reception on the market do tend to have higher rates. Now, the assessor read you some numbers on vacancy. Now, I have a roll here, and since he did read in these post-reference numbers, I do get to read in mine. In 2016, mid-year, the vacancy was 73.5%, because that was a lease-up year. By the end of the year, and this is December 15th, 2017, the vacancy was down to 11.8%. So the assessor mentioned a number earlier of 84, and then he said 87. So our data is somewhat in agreement. We had a 12 to 13% vacancy during this year for startup. And that's just a matter of that's what the project is worth. If you were going to sell it, you have to live with your vacancy. So you can see that when we did our calculation on my page 1, we actually used a 10% rate, just to account for maybe some last minute lease ups. And as a result, our NOI goes to 639,000, which I would submit is far more accurate than 720,000. You do have to allow some higher vacancies in the startup years. And that's a principle that the last, I guess every property I brought in before this board that's newly constructed, it's something that the board has been receptive to, because it kind of makes sense. I'm not saying you have to follow anyone else's decision, but being logical and reasonable is something that should never be out of vogue. The next issue is the capitalization rate. And on this basis, the city, of course, has provided you no evidence. As again, they provided you no evidence. And we think that you must look at the market, and this is a superior product. We do have some properties listed, and on our page 24 are some of our examples. And the one, of course, that's the closest to this is on page 24, is the fourth one down, 333 Ward. And this is, again, a newer construction. This building was, at time of sale, was 10 years old and had fully leased up, and it capped at 5.5%. Our brokers handled this deal, and so our information has been substantiated by our brokers as well as by the purchaser. It's my understanding that this has been reported by other people at a lower rate. There was an error in their calculation, and subsequent to that, I found out some more information about their processes, which would indicate that, yes, indeed, they made an error. It is a true 5.5% rate, and other rate studies you've seen are erroneously reporting it. And on camera, I don't want to discuss the reasons, but I think we're very confident in our number. Another building, which I was going to bring up, is on page 25, and this is across the street from 333 Ward. It's 336 Ward, so this is another new building, built 2014. And this property, again, we have all full financials. Now, the projections on this, when it was built, were to cap at 8% as full. They suffered a higher vacancy than planned, and by 2016, that number actually worked out to 6% on an effective rate. Now, the building was not sold. This is merely taking the net income that it was generating in second year and comparing it to the cost to construct. So these two new projects indicate that, you know, the 5% rates are unreasonable. A 5% rate, in my opinion, you won't see it on the market on a true sale because it's usually a project rate. But any aggressive rate is going to be based on a very stable, long-term revenue and the ability to have an upside in rent somewhere, which means that the rents have to be below the point where you can invest money and increase them through renovation. In the case of the subject, you can see our rents are already at the high end of the market. They are not moving upwards. If you have a rent that ranges between $1,200 and $2,200, you're not going to be able to go out and tell your tenant, oh, by the way, 5% rent increase next year. It just won't happen because that's a lot of money. Whereas a 5% rate increase on a $400 rent and push it past RTB on your renovation side will stand the test of the market. So that's the problem with a 5% rate on a building that does not have an upward movement. Another thing that this doesn't have an upward potential for increase is the ability to offset utilities. Often older buildings where the landlord is carrying the utilities, and if he does a renovation and offloads utilities to tenants, he's got an upside income down the road. So when he looks at in-place income and sells it on the basis of the future upside, it will show an artificially low cap. This will not. There's no opportunity to offload expenses. So those are two of the reasons why the cap rates have to be reasonable. We do have some, the rates. And the last issue that I like to bring up, and I know that sometimes it's greeted with a what does this matter to us sort of look, but it's true. Page 14. This This is a concept of, in what we used in the appraisal profession call a mortgage equity. And the idea here is to look at yields. Now, the reason we have cap rates in the first place is to show how much an investor makes on the property. There's no, that's what it is, they wanna make money. In order to make money, you need to offload as much of the debt as possible into a loan. Now, what this shows is that at today's interest rates, and if you have you take a loan in a standard 70% ratio, you need a cap rate of 5.4% just to break even, which means that your bank manager, when he sees your income and you bring it to him and said, Mr. Bank Manager, I'd like a loan, if you're not earning enough money to pay the loan, you don't get the loan, which means you're driven to have a high rate of return in order to get a return on your investment. Now, what we're showing on that's in the first column, that the 5.4% is a break even. And then if you look at 8% returns, if you target that on your NOI, then of course you'll provide your investors with an 8.73% rate of return. That coupled with the retirement of the financing over a period of time, and some hope for the property's appreciation in value, indicate that the market needs rates above 5.4% break even. Bank managers are not lending money on crazy 5% caps because they know the person's gonna go in default. Now that's just the harsh truth of the world, and what you've probably heard over the last couple of months is how these cap rates are out there. They're still out there. Well, they're not out there. The cap rates that you see that are listed below the break-even points have other issues associated with them. Generally what they are is they're properties that are sold, that are low performing, where a capital investment comes later and they can drive the rents up. In cases like that, the cap rate is not to be relied upon. What I'm trying to highlight here is a cap rate is tied to capital markets. It's tied to the world. It's not independent. It's not something we just put our blinders on and say, oh, I've got a bunch of examples capped out here. They're not real. So we do, there is another example, which I'm still trying to get my hands on the data of a high rise that capped at 6%. But again, the best properties will cap, even though I'm showing the 5.4 break even, a really good property can still cap at 5.5 if they get financing from another source. And if you're a $14 million project, of course you can get financing from someone other than your credit union. But it's not gonna drive the cap below the 5.5% mark. You're still going to have to live with that. And that's my explanation of it. Those are the comparables I have with it, and that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ross.
Okay, so on page 1, your 2017 income is 1,175,140. So when I go to page 3, just confirming, this is a record of what they collected.
These are the statements that I mentioned that I was looking at their statements, and yes, they're post-reference.
They're post-reference, okay.
But, as I said earlier, reliance is difficult in cases like this, but because we are on the same, roughly on the same page on gross income, I think it's supportive.
Just looking at the chart here, if I look down and I see total revenue, it says 1 million on line 4,999. It says 1,175,140. That's where you've got the.
What page is that?
Oh, sorry, on page 3.
Okay.
And then I went halfway down where it says total revenue.
Right.
And it says 1,175,000.
Right.
That column says G/L budget.
Right.
On it. The row beside it, it says the total revenue is 1,267,771. And when I start going down these other rows, like for instance, if I look at parking revenue, it looks like parking revenue is fairly consistent throughout the months, and I take that 7,417 and I multiply it by 12. What I'm getting is I'm getting the number in the column beside it, where it says road total.
Again, as you can see, if you look at the top, that the start month is January 2018, and this is a budget. Reliance on this is relatively low. What we did have in our possession when we prepared this was the statement made by the assessment department from the website, and we did see that you had an income of $1,166,000. And we decided that we don't disagree with it. We were just gonna use a slightly different number because we had it in paper. So this didn't form a great deal of reliance. The reliance was on your start point. We're not disagreeing on gross rent. What we are disagreeing on is vacancy.
So this is, you're saying this is a budget for 2018, not
That's correct.
recollection of 2017?
No.
Okay. Okay, so 10% vacancy. Would an investor expect 10% vacancy? Like, this is probably like a long-term investment for somebody. Would they expect 10% vacancy in perpetuity?
Well, most of the new projects, when they're budgeted for sale, are putting 10% for the first 5 years as a safeguard, because projects have been absorbing at different rates. Some projects we've seen after 10 years, or sorry, after 5 years, are still at 10%. Some have reduced it to around 5 or 6% for properties like this that have a higher rental structure. They're never going to be at 2%. So we're now budgeting in our sales, I believe our investor sales are now looking at a 10 startup, tapering to 5% over the 5th year and 5% thereafter. Because not only, because we're at the higher end of the scale, not only is it harder to lease up, it's harder to retain. There's something we haven't seen in our market for several decades, which is competition. So this property will go out and give away a free month of rent to get someone to sign a 1-year deal. When their term's up, there's another new project who's offering the same thing. So, which is why the 5% is the number for the higher end performers. I think it's logical, you know, if, like I said, if the rent's $400 a month, 2% is pretty good vacancy. You're gonna fill that, you know, your tenant leaves and you're gonna fill it that afternoon. With $2,000 rent, you're gonna be empty a while.
Okay. And just 333 Ward, we talked about how another organization had it at 5. Do you have a breakdown at all of your 5.5?
Well,
calculations?
we were the firm that did the sale. So that's what our investor people had calculated, and I know there are other people in this room who also participated in the sale, and we're all aware that it was a 5.5% sale. I can say this, I know that Mr. Story had a copy of a document that showed where the error was. It was a miscalculation between the offering rate and the eventual sale rate. That's what his assertion, that where the error lay. And I know it's to be an error, that's all.
Those are my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Buss?
Was there a land sale?
Yeah, I think so. I see that, I don't have the number on the land sales.
Reasonably recent?
It,
Or they owned this piece for a long time?
no, I'm not even sure if it's on leased land from the railway, because if you look at the permit, no, it was a recent sale. A lot of activity in this area. The land sales in this area, they range. They're getting fairly good sales rates.
Okay, in regards to the 10% vacancy that you are using, and you talked quite a bit about the city putting it on the rolls. 2017, I think it was 13%.
Right.
But when they put it on in August, or I should say when the leases start, when they're leasing up in August of 2016, and by August they already had 54%. But yet the building doesn't get put on the rolls till later in 17, over a year. Doesn't that make up for some of the, I mean, I can't do the math,
Yeah,
right, as it is.
I didn't
but-
know the assessment department had a makeup thing, you know, is that like a ref in the NHL calls you a makeup penalty? I can't answer that question. The only question I know to answer is that in that year, in that calendar year, at the end of it, that calendar year, we were at 11.8% vacancy. So it still hadn't leased up, so, you know, if they had chose to put it on the roll at the beginning of the year, I guess I'd probably argue 20% vacancy, because mid-year, the rate was, my books here is 73%.
We were down to, I heard 11% somewhere. in-
Yeah, 11.8,
17,
11.8
yeah.
in December of 17, which is why we went to 10.
Okay, I wouldn't wanna start doing the math, but, that's all my questions.
Thank you.
I have no additional questions.
I just have a couple. This subject property, does it have a sister property on Permanent?
Well, this property owner has 3 recent multi-family projects, the 2 side-by-side on Sterling Lion, and they have another one on Pembina Highway.
So, you're talking about the vacancy, are there rental incentives?
Rather new account for me. Yes, there are incentives.
Do you know what they are?
No, I don't have that information. It's, these days, it's typically a month per year to sign up.
But you don't know.
I can't confirm that, no.
Thank you, that's all my questions. We'll proceed to 2018.
Okay, so, try to be brief, 2018, it's the same property. Just the reference here has changed. Still, the information we have, again, is post-reference, so we're still in the same spot there. Average monthly rent on page 3 is $1,481, 67 with a 36. 87 expense ratio, net operating income 741,897. No other 5% cap comes in with an estimated rounded value of 14,838,000. Page 4. If you go to this page, you see our rental comps. Again, our rent falls in line with comps in the area. I also did again the expense ratio lookup. For these properties. 3 of the 4 I was able to get, but as comparable 3 was built in 2015, the information was not available, so hence it was not available. It looks like the expense ratio used by the city here falls in line with the comps, as do the rents. So there was no change in that respect. So physically, it's the same, it's just another year, just different numbers. Thanks.
Thank you. Cinderella, any questions?
Same as before, I suppose, and same answers as before. Okay. Now, you brought up the expense ratio. Is this a standard ratio that's applied to all properties?
This ratio here, it depends on the year built in the area that it's in, how the.
Oh, sorry, I should
slots
say,
it.
but this is an assessment department rate. There's no override here?
Not to my knowledge, no.
And on the vacancy, I noticed the previous year was 2.2 and this year it's 2.8. Is that a market issue?
That would just be model
model?
Yeah, the model to fix the vacancy, right?
Do you know if the model differentiates the vacancy rate based on the rental rate?
I don't think it does.
You don't think that might be a factor?
It could be, depends on how much demand there is.
Okay, that's a fair answer. Those are my questions, and thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Bess?
Have you inspected this property?
Unfortunately, no.
And you're using a 5% cap rate on this property?
Yes.
That's all my questions.
Thank you.
I don't have any further questions.
And I have no further questions. Mr. Neufeld?
Okay. This is the same issue again, and we're just put in the same gross income again, and again, we're not far off from the assessor's gross income, and I don't think that that's a factor that we're challenging, because anytime you're dealing with a property whose earnings are all post-reference, you're always going to have to estimate, and I don't have a problem with their estimate of income. Whether you use theirs or ours isn't important. What is important is the vacancy again. Now, in this case, now we're another year further into the project. I mentioned to you that at the end of 2017, the vacancy rate was 11.8%. Now, going into 2018, the fiscal year of this role, the vacancy had dropped to 8.8%, based on lease-ups that were to occur in the first few months of the year. And so that's what we physically know. And of course, since it's only April 2018, we can't, that's where it is today, around 8.8%. But what I had said earlier about a 5% mark for buildings like this, that's where it's going to even out at, likely for the next few years. And after that, it's going to be a different market. Now, this was a rather hurried appeal, and I didn't have the opportunity to give you the CMHC standards, but I can quote them verbally. CMHC tracks vacancy rates by age, property type, bedroom type, rental rate. The bottom line is, the higher the rental rate, the higher the vacancy is. Naturally, this rate is going to be higher than the rest of the market. That's issue number one. Issue number two is we're still in the build-up stage, which is roughly 5 years. And we always, our brokers use a 5% rate for those first years, and that's what we've applied here, is a 5% rate. Other than that, again, we differ with the capitalization, and my comment is there's no such thing as a 5% rate on a revenue property, because no one's gonna lend you money or buy it from you at that rate, unless there's an upside, in which case it doesn't count as a cap rate. The 5.5% rates are as low as the market should see. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Baracus?
I guess my questions are all the same, I already asked them, so no questions.
Did you inspect this property?
No, I was away having fun and damaging myself. We got, this is a very late supplemental appeal, and they put it in quite quickly, so I never got around to it.
Hence, late.
Pardon me? Oh, late? L-A-T-E. That's all my questions.
Does it say late on here?
It does. No, for
Could
good.
say latte. And I have no questions. I'd like to leave it with us. Thank you. Do you have any wish for
A
summation?
brief summation.
Brief, Mr. Baracus? Do you have a wish for summation?
No.
Just, maybe it's gonna end up being longer, but again, we're talking about a building that's being constructed, and there are lots of issues to deal with. Like, we talked about expense ratio. We don't even know what the expense ratio is going to be until we've had a few years of operation. The city says 39 or 36%, and I put in 40%. You know, in the statements we showed you, it actually had an estimate for property taxes of $140,000. At 14 million, the taxes are about 180,000. So that's, the expenses are gonna come in higher, and the ratios are gonna change. So that is the difficulty of dealing with newly constructed projects. We are generally in agreement on the potential income. We disagree on the vacancy, and we disagree on the expense ratio because the numbers aren't in yet, and we disagree on the cap. And I think all of our reasons are strong, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Just gonna have a brief recess. Okay, I'd like to call this hearing back to order. Good morning, Mr. Smith.
Good morning.
Can you state your full name, please?
Trevor Glenn Smith.
Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
And Mr. Baracus, we've got 3 years happening.
Yeah, can we start with 2018? Just for paper saving efforts, I just included the pictures and a lot of the stuff on 2018. And then can we go backwards from there?
Are you all right with that? That's fine. Okay. I will be a moment. I've never gone backwards. Okay.
Okay, so 01, 00203, 0000, 4025 Rockland Boulevard. Supplementary assessment notices were issued. We've got 2 income streams here. We've got classification institutional taxable and institutional school tax exempt. Taxable 1,156,000. School taxable exempt 2,661,000. For total assessed value on the supplementary assessment notice is 3,817,000 rounded. Parcel use res app, 1 building, 3 stories, actual year built 1925, effective year built 1975. 33 suites, 32 outdoor parking spots, construction class C, masonry bearing walls. I made a reduction to the assessment to reduce the assessment to $2,745,000 to better reflect the condition of the property following an inspection, and also a change in the value of the 40T institutional taxable portion of the assessment. So, just to give you a little background on this property, it's an assisted living property out on Roblin. If we go to page 10, you'll see a picture of the site plan. So at the back is the assisted living. As it's an assisted living, the rents that they receive include services, meal preparation, light housekeeping, cable TV, events, so on and so forth. So as per methodology, we don't use the rents they receive. We use market rents. So subs were issued on this property because there was an error in classification. This property is roughly 4.5 acres in size. So according to the Municipal Assessment Act, section 23(1)(b), real property is exempt from a taxation for school purposes where the real property going on to be is used by a non-profit organization such as this, charitable organization or municipality, as an elderly person's housing unit, hostel as defined by the Elderly and Infirm Persons Housing Act, to a maximum exemption of 0.81 hectares, so 2 acres. So what happened is we had this property, all 4.5 acres exempt, though by the Municipal Assessment Act, only 2 of the 4.5 should be school tax exempt. That's why the supplementary issues were noticed. So, like Trevor and I had talked about this. He contacted me ahead of time, and we set up an inspection of the place. I'll just deal with the land first, and we'll deal with the permit after. So during the conversation, Mr. Smith, what he had done is he had passed along, if you go to page 13, I included a portion of what was passed along. Basically, it was a zoning agreement between the city of Winnipeg and the property owner from back in 2000 in regards to some restrictions that were, that are and currently are on the property. I checked on title, these are still on the property. So some of these restrictions include no more than 33 units shall be permitted on the land. The land of the building structure shall not be used for erected, placed, altered, enlarged on the land for any use other than seniors accommodations. So the use that it's in now, number 4, the existing building on the land together with proposed addition shall be the only principal building permitted on the land, and such building shall be limited in height to 3 stories. There's other provisions here. In number 7, it says, nothing in this agreement shall restrict or affect the powers of the city to amend, repeal, or vary zoning bylaw applicable to the land, or to enact zoning bylaw or rezoning of the land. It's understood that the execution of this agreement by the city cannot operate to affect any variance to the zoning bylaw. Basically, it could be changed in the future, but currently, there are some restrictions on the land. This, at the time the supplementary notices were issued, this was not seen by the person who issued them. So as a result, the per square foot land value that was put on this property was too high. It was more of a market model for market level for properties that don't have these restrictions on it. So in order to reconcile these restrictions, the land was given more of a nominal value. Previously, it was, I think it was like $10 and change per square foot. That was brought down to a more nominal value of $3 per square foot. And that $3 per square foot was applied to the land that is excess of the 2 acres that school tax exempts. So that's why there was an adjustment in that regard. So if you go to page 3, you'll see that on the second column, cost property adjustments, $335,000. That's the new taxable institutional value, 40T. This $3 a square foot is a rate that it's something that's seen more for like in similar instances like this where there's like for school grounds or parklands. That's what the assessment department typically puts on property, and typically it's not challenged. So, I mean, while they can't build on it, they still have the right of enjoyment to the land. They can go onto the land is in their possession, and it explicitly says in the zoning agreement that it could be changed one day. But as it stands, there are a lot of restrictions on this property, so giving it the $10 per square foot would be unreasonable. So that's why the $3 was applied. In regards to, if you look at page 3, the apartment value, you'll see the estimated market value has been changed to $2,410,000. from 2,661,000. I met Mr. Smith out there. We set up an inspection. I went there, took some pictures, I looked at it. Like it's pretty bare bones, and the rent that it was getting before, in my opinion, was in excess of what it would get on. The rent that the model was giving it is in excess of what it would have been getting, in my opinion. If you look at page 4, you'll see that there's some rental comps, as well as the CMHC average rents. In my opinion, the suites, they would be below average, however. That's why I reduced the average monthly rent to the lowest quality in our system to take into account the smaller suite sizes. The interior, it can be in the hallways almost hospital-like in many ways. So as you see that, adjusting the average monthly rent to 707,000 puts it below the comps, and also below the CMHC private average apartment rents by a good amount. Just following up on the condition, if you go to page 18, you'll see some photos from the inspection. So, I mean, the exterior of the property, it does look like it's been well maintained. Looks like there's some newer windows. The roof looked to be in good condition when I was doing the walk around. However, when you go inside, you see that it's pretty, it's pretty bare bones. It's not comparable to like assisted livings you'd find on St. Anne or Ridgecrest. You see some pictures of the suites as well. There's one page for you here. Like on page 25, 26, it's pretty basic in there. When we were in there's some guys, basically they were just fixing up the place whenever there was some damage done. So they're maintained, but they're not renovated to any sort of extent. They're not the biggest in size either. So to reflect that, I lowered the quality on our system to poor. Page 31 through 34. Looks like some of the mechanical has been updated. However, looking at the income they would be receiving on the open market of poor quality is more reflective of what's their actual condition. So I knocked that down in our system, and I think, well, just glancing ahead, now our net operating incomes are only $4,000 away from each other, and we're $4,000 lower, so I don't think there's really going to be too much of a disagreement there. 5.25% cap was put on this property to reflect that it has had some work done to it. Based on the effective year built, like it's obviously not an original 1925 building anymore. So in summation, I made the adjustments. The primary driver of the adjustment is based on receiving the restrictions in the zoning agreement and taking those into consideration. The remaining small adjustment was based on the quality of the suites. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
Yes, first of all, I'd just like to thank Mr. Baracus for coming to the inspection. I think that was helpful all around for everybody involved. I do have a few questions, so we'll just run through these quickly here. You had mentioned the The supplemental assessments were done by a prior assessor, I believe, that's correct?
Correct.
And at the time of issuing that supplemental, they were not aware of the zoning agreement restrictions on the property
That is correct.
at that time. The structure itself, we had gone through it, as you had mentioned. Again, you had mentioned kind of an institutional feel, hospital, school-like in terms of the common areas and the suites themselves to a certain extent. Is that fair?
Yes, I would agree with that.
Okay. The units themselves, they don't have full kitchens, correct? If we-
Yeah, they just have
photo shows
kitchenettes,
that.
yeah.
So it would have a sink and a bar fridge and a couple of cabinets, correct?
Yeah,
They're very small in size.
yes, they are.
Okay. And again, the fit out is of a very basic nature.
Yeah, it's maintained, but it's basic.
Okay. Building was built in 1925, and we have the conversion in 2001 to assisted living units. Just wondering how the 1975 date is arrived at as far as an effective age. The build-out itself would just be renovations to the suites essentially, correct? Maybe some new panel or two.
That is correct.
So there would be no, you didn't see evidence of any common area upgrades or anything of that nature? Is that fair to say?
No, not common area upgrades. I believe there was an addition put on the property. I don't have the date on it.
It would be the 2001. They added roughly 10% of the overall space, I believe, of the building.
So yeah, it's basic, but I mean, it's not 1925 basic, and there has been some, it looks like mechanical upgrades to it. The windows are newer, the roof is newer. I was not around at the time to do this, so that would have been the judgment call of the person who issued those adjustments.
Okay, so looking at cap rate then, let me flip to that page. No direct evidence of cap rates is being supplied by the city, correct?
No specifics, no.
Individual sales. And page number 5 is your standard chart of cap rates.
Yes, it is.
And looking at the multifamily section there, the overall range would fall between 5 and 6.75.
Depending on effective year built and area.
Right. And again, the 20th to 80th percentile is 5.25 to 5.5. So we're at the low end of that. At the 20th percentile at 5.25, does this type of structure and build out size, amenities, etc., seem reflective of 5.25?
Cap rates are assigned by the model based on effective year built
So
and area.
it would be model
It's
driven
model
based
driven.
largely on the effective age that is assigned to it.
That is correct.
Okay. Those are all of my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Best?
What is the vacancy like in a place like this? I see you using 5%, but is it, when you inspected, was it fully occupied?
I don't have that information.
What was, do you know what the original use was before it was, in 2001, the renovations were done? Was the use changed at that time?
I believe so. It was, I mean, I think, I'm not as versed on the background, I'm just looking through Trevor's brief right now. He would probably be better
I'll ask him and
equipped to answer that question.
when the time comes. That's all my questions.
All right, no further questions.
Just have a couple quick ones. There's 33 suites you indicated,
That is correct.
and 24 one-bedroom,
Mhm.
theater studio, the one with the two-bedroom.
Yes.
Would you say that's not really reflective of most senior living, assisted living places?
I think most senior living places are kind of unique unto their own. They've got different levels of quality and layouts and suite counts and sizes and amenities.
Do you know if this building has air conditioning?
Not central air conditioning, no.
So wall units?
It would, I didn't see any out there in the season that air conditioning's not around, but it would be wall units if it was there, I believe.
Okay. So you're giving this a 5.25 cap rate, even though this building was built in 1925 and it has a stone foundation?
Yes, it's driven by effective year built and area.
And your comparisons on page 4 of your brief, are those also assisted living?
No, they're not. Assisted living rents received would include the services and would be much higher, in excess of $2,000. I believe this place, even though that's not what we're including, gets rents more in that ballpark, but we have to use, but that includes the services, so we have to use just treating it like a normal apartment.
Okay, thank you. All my questions. Gentlemen, are we in disagreement over cap rate? Is that the
Yes.
bottom line here? Just to sort of shorten
It's
things up.
not just cap rate. We're very close in terms of income, so I won't spend a lot of time on that.
Okay.
But the land is a major issue.
Okay, if you'd like to proceed.
Thank you. So, bit of a quick background on the property. It was developed again in 1922 is actually the date that I have, 22, 25, it's not much of a difference. By the Oddfellows organization as housing for orphans at the time frame. So you'd have a lot of people that didn't return from the war, etc., and there was large need for housing for orphans at that time. So the Oddfellows developed this project at that time. If you actually go around to the back of the building, and I forgot to include a photo of it, it has separate entrances for boys and girls marked on the exterior in the stone, which I thought was interesting. Anyway, sideline. The building has been owned since that time by the Oddfellows. It's currently under the name Assiniboine Links Phase 2 Inc., which is wholly owned and run by the Oddfellows. All the board members are Oddfellows and make all the decisions related to it. So it is a nonprofit entity. It had been run as a seniors care facility prior to its 2000-2001 conversion to the assisted living model. They felt that there was a greater need for them to provide assisted living, low-income assisted living facility versus seniors care facility at that time frame. So they made application to change the use to that at that time. So that's kind of the background of the building. I'll direct you to my page number 9 if you want to read the text, and I'll just quickly go through this for you. Again, it was converted in that 2000-2001 timeframe with an addition constructed to the rear of the building of roughly 10% at that time. Building's 3 stories in height, 33 total suites as the breakout shows. So there's one 2-bedroom unit, which is the caretaker's suite. We have applied standard rental rate to that. And the units themselves are spread over the 3 floors, with the main floor and the basement having some communal common areas. You have the communal dining room and kitchen area on the main floor, 2 separate office areas for staff and volunteer offices, and then a few rental units as well. The basement has a multipurpose room, which is a games room, and a mechanical storage and various other common areas in the basement there, with the remainder of the building being the units. As stated, the units themselves are quite small. They range between 342 square feet on the low end up to 605 square feet, that being your 1 2-bedroom unit, with the average being 487 square feet. So they're much smaller than your typical apartment units, which we're tasked with comparing it to. The unit build-out, as you can see from the photos on the previous pages, very basic accommodation in nature, with finishes designed to, to last a long time rather than be beautiful and increase the rental value. They have kitchenettes with a bar, fridge, and sink, very small in size. I believe I have a photo of that in there as well. The building, however, is from 1925. Doing a renovation to a new use in 2001 does not bring the building up to an effective date of 1975 by doing some renovations and demising to suites. Simply 1925 building with some modifications. So as mentioned, we have a masonry foundation which does experience issues with water penetration and sealing. They have had to spend some money on their elevator and stairwell access. Obviously, as a seniors residence, they've got to have the elevator in place for the 3-story. And that largely covers the building. If you look at the photos, you can see some of the interior photos on my page number 6 from the basement. You can see some of the water penetration issues. Again, photos of the suites themselves give you an idea of the level of build out and some of the wear and tear. And again, pages 4 and 5 give you an indication of the level of finish of the common areas, as well as I guess page 3 at the bottom, that being the front entrance. I neglected to include a photo of the front stairs as you're going in, but it's limestone from 1922-25 and is in heavy deterioration. So as you're walking into the building, that's your kind of your first impression of the building. Yes, it is maintained, but it's very basic in nature. And when you compare that to other properties out there, you need to take that into account. Looking at, we have a few major issues, so I will try and stick to those as best we can here. The site itself is shown on my page numbers 10 and 11. We have a closer aerial and then a larger one to show you the location by on the northwest corner of William Clement Parkway. It's rectangular in shape, as you can see, access off of Roblin with a small gravel parking area just to the right hand, or rather eastern side of the site, with circulation space in and around the building itself. Then you have the larger aerial on page number 11. The supplemental assessment that was issued, The owners of the property appealed the property last spring, and then engaged me later on in the process once they realized they needed representation. And we came to the hearing for that. There had been no brief submitted by the city, and I had a quick discussion with the former assessor in charge of this one, and she indicated that she had just issued a supplemental on the property based on land value not having been taken into account. So I made her aware of the zoning agreement that was in place, but it proceeded, the supplemental stuck and proceeded. Now I certainly respect Mr. Baracus taking a closer look at it and making some adjustments, but it still doesn't accurately reflect the market value of this property based on the circumstances in place for it. So looking at page number 12, let's actually move on to page number 13, so just next to that, highest and best use. So this is an appraisal point. The highest and best use of a property is an economic concept that measures the interaction of 4 criteria, those being legal permissibility, physical possibility, financial feasibility, and maximum profitability. The first one being the most important, legal permissibility, is the use or potential use of that property as of the valuation date legally permissible. And in this case, there is no legal permissibility for any further development on this site, which renders the land that is in question here, as far as having a value applied to it, there is no additional value to be gained by this, as you cannot generate any economic value out of that land, either now or in the future, as the zoning agreement stands. So the single most important factor that influences highest and best use is the property, is the use to which the property can be put as the zoning as it exists. So that is all to frame the zoning agreement. If we move back to page 12, against that, you can see that registered on title for the property, we have a caveat, which is the building restriction and zoning agreement, which was struck between the city of Winnipeg and the Odd Fellows organization, the Assiniboine Links, etc. And I'll just run through these quickly. I've included the zoning agreement in the addenda for you, and I'll just make these points quickly. So the point of the 4 is, pardon me, the property is restricted to seniors accommodation only. They can have only 33 units on site, which is what they have now. The existing building is to be the only building on site, and it's not to exceed the 3 stories in size that it currently is. And number 6, no further development of the property is permitted that wasn't outlined in their original Schedule A of the zoning agreement, which was to convert it to the 33 units. So there is no further development of this property allowed under any circumstances. Now, the point is made by the city that this doesn't restrict the city from making a zoning change in the future if they were if it were applied for, and if they were to go through the proper channels and accept that change. That is speculative and is not what's under assessment today. What we're assessing is the property as it stands. You can't assess for the potential future value of the property as it may change. You have to assess the property as it is. You could say, I have a site that's, currently zoned residential, I'd like to change it to commercial use and build an office tower on it. Well, that's obviously an exaggeration, but it's the same principle. You can't assess for what could happen in the future. Now, to speak to the zoning agreement itself, when they were going forward with trying to get this renovation done to assisted living and change the zoning agreement, the city councillor at the time was very strongly against any further development on the site, as were the surrounding residential landowners on the adjacent street. And there's actually wording to that effect in the zoning agreement. And they had to take action as far as creating screening for neighboring properties, etc., in order for the use to be permitted. They're very concerned that there'd be a lot more traffic, etc. So I don't imagine that particular objection has changed in that time frame. So on one hand, you have the city saying, we don't want any further development on this site, and now in the future, we have the city saying, oh, but there's value to that land that we aren't allowing you to develop. It does not work that way in the market either. The property owners themselves indicated that they would have no interest in attempting to split off the frontage of their land in any sense either. That's not something they're seeking to do. They're seeking to provide their service, and if they were forced into a situation where they had to sell, they would only sell the entire property as it is, and the zoning agreement would obviously go forward with that. Another point that I'd make from page 12 is at the time of the zoning agreement and the application being made, the City Standing Policy Committee on Property and Development noted that the building is listed on the historic buildings inventory, but is not yet designated as a historic building on the buildings conservation list. So since that time, there's been some adjustment in terms of historic buildings and lists, etc. So it's kind of on the watch list, which would mean that any application that would be made to tear down the building would trigger alarm bells, and there'd be a heavy attention paid to the retention of the existing building on site, it being of such a historical nature in the city. So you both have land you can't develop and a building you very likely cannot tear down. So all that being said, the highest and best use under the conditions that exist as of the valuation date are the current use as an assisted living center on site with the number of units that they have. So moving forward from there quickly through the valuation, we have an assisted living center, as mentioned, with services that provides. Our job is to bring that back to market rental rates for apartments. And we have followed similar patterns for this. We arrive at slightly different NOIs. If you look at my page number 17, what we've done in determining our income and expense approach, on the income side, we've presented the CMHC stats and looked at the suburban area averages and made a deduction of 10% from those average figures at the end of 2015 to reflect the smaller size and condition, et cetera, of the units that would be rented in this building. If you look at the area it sits within, obviously rental rates are higher, that being the area of Assiniboine Park, but they are not reflective of what would be achieved in this particular property, which is why I've used suburban offices, or rather the suburban area averages. So bottom of the page gives us our resultant our resultant gross income based on these projected rents. Page 5, you had spoken about vacancy. The property had a 16% vacancy at year end of 2015 on their income and expense questionnaire. If you look at it as an assisted living center, using inclusive of the services, their vacancy rate would equate to 20.6% at that time frame. Now, given the size and finish of the rental units, condition of the building, etc., it's expected that vacancy would be higher than normal for a normal market property. For the purposes of this analysis, we're not asking for 10 or 15 or 20% vacancy. We're accounting for this additional vacancy risk within our increased capitalization rate, which is consistent with appraisal standards. So there's text on page 18 for you there. The expense side, the actual expenses of the property, we stabilized them for 2016. If you were to use the stabilized expenses, it would equate to 75% of the effective gross income, which is clearly not appropriate, so we're not using the actual expenses, even though they are the actual for the property. So we have deferred to the city's expense ratio of 52.46% to get our expenses. Now, thinking about that logically, you have a building from 1925 with stone walls and foundation and all of the issues that go along with that. There's going to be some higher maintenance costs and some higher utility costs as well. So our NOI comes out on page 20 to $130,097, somewhat close to the city. Moving on to the cap rate side, we'll try and do this relatively quickly. Thinking about it logically, just to start with, we have a structure built in 1925 that's been retrofitted with small apartment suites without kitchens, essentially. And we have land that has no further development potential. There's really no upside on this property at all. You're not going to increase the rents there. You're not going to put additional units on this site. It is what it is. So you're not going to be towards the lower end of the range, and certainly a 5.25% cap rate is at the very, very bottom end, in fact, below what I would term the bottom end of an investment range, that being 5.5%, as mentioned by an earlier appellant. We both have the same information on the the truest investment sale in the marketplace in this time frame, that being the 333 Ward sale. We confirmed the information that Mr. Neufeld presented earlier regarding the cap rate actually being 5.5%. We confirmed it with the purchaser regarding all of the data that went into the arrival at that cap rate. It is accurate at 5.5% and has been misreported by others at 5%, 5.2%, etc. It is a true 5.5% sale. That is a recent sale, very recent sale of.
Excuse me, do you have that in your brief?
I believe I put it in my brief. Yes, on page number 25 at the very top of that chart. So 5.44 or 5.5%. The emphasis on that is that you have a newly built 10-year-old structure, very well leased, high market rates, no upside in terms of achieving greater rents, etc., or offloading expenses. What you're buying there is the in-place income, and that's trading at a 5.5% cap. So you're not going to get better than that, and the bank is only going to lend to you on the basis where you're both covering your mortgage and making a return on your investment. So 5.5% is the very low end of the market. With regard to assisted living sales and senior centers, I provide a bit of text on this. Obviously, there's increased risk in this case, both in terms of the building, size of the units, attractiveness to the market, but you have a smaller market component, that being only seniors. You have additional operating expenses, you have the physical condition, and then on disposition, if you were to look at selling the property, in this case in particular, there is a zoning agreement in place that will make it very unattractive to any purchasers. So all that taken into account, there is a lot of risk involved in purchasing in this particular property. Pardon me. Page number 22, just very bottom, there's a chart with regard to seniors housing and healthcare cap rate survey by CBRE at the end of 2015. You can see that in the major centers, we have minimum and maximum between 6 and 7.5% for seniors housing properties as they're describing it. And the chart above is similar to that. Now, what we're valuing here is the property as a market rental apartment is our purpose. So that is our end goal. To that end, we present the charts on page 23 and 24. Summarizing those, we have cap rates for low-rise apartments between 5.5 and 6% for C.B. Richard Ellis, and Collier's indicating 5 to 5.75, which, as Mr. Neufeld has mentioned many times, is inaccurate. Moving on from there, our market cap rates are shown on page number 25, and as you can see, they are in and around 6% by and large, with the 5.5% being the low end of the market. The risk involved on this particular property for any purchaser would be quite high, and a premium would be applied to that purchase. So we've used a 6.5% cap rate, which gives us our final value of $2,001,000. Just very quickly, this property was heard at Board of Revision back in November. As I had stated, the order is at the very back of my brief. And at that time, it indicates the decision was based on the applicant's evidence. Now, my evidence hasn't changed, and I have the exact same number, but if you run through it, the assessed value that they arrive at is slightly higher. If you do the math, it looks like they used a 5.75% cap rate, which I heavily disagree with, but that is the starting point where they were at the time. There is no, it's simply not possible this would trade at a 5.75% cap. The addenda materials include the I&E and the audited statements from the building itself. I have included the zoning agreement. for you to refer to if you need further information on that. I've also included the Standing Policy Committee statement regarding the historic building nature of the property. And we also have text with regard to highest and best use and the importance of the legal permissibility aspect with regard to determining value. The very final thing I'll point out, and appreciate your patience, is in the addenda, the very first page, after Appendix 3, there's a letter from the Assiniboine Links. And I'll let you read this at your leisure, but essentially the property has been supplementally assessed for 2018, 17, and 16. And the ownership, being a nonprofit, has seen their monthly tax bill jump from $1,901 to over $9,000. If you read the text further, this is insupportable. It will imminently, probably within the year, drive them to a point of decision-making as far as can they continue to operate this facility, or will they be forced out of business, essentially. It's simply not sustainable. So that was given to me by the ownership, and they wish to present that to the board, so I've included it for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You guys need to do something?
I have to
move
add my
cars.
parking.
Yeah,
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Did you have to move that?
So for the last decision, I got notes here saying that the previous assessor didn't present or ask any questions, is that correct?
That's correct.
So then this decision didn't include her verbal presentation or persuasion?
She provided no evidence, but the board at the time heard the evidence that I presented and made their decision accordingly.
Okay, so they only heard one set of evidence essentially?
That's all that was presented to them.
Just in regards to the Boulevard ward, it's been talked about here for a couple of properties, and it's been said that this person said it was 5.5 and this person said it was 5.44. Today Altus brought in a cap rate study showing it at 5.04%. That cap rate study included 3-year stabilization, income and expenses, and 5-year of R&M. Do you guys have any calculations to support the 5.4?
We do, yes, and we've confirmed them with the purchaser of the property. We haven't presented them in our evidence, as we don't go through that extent in presenting the individual caps. Suffice it to say, we do go through them extensively and confirm the details. And both ourselves with the purchaser and Mr. Neufeld earlier, who was privy to the information of the purchase as his firm was, or the sale rather, his firm was involved in it, have confirmed all the details and reflected that it's not a matter of he said, she said. This is the actual information, and the information that is presented to you and that you just discussed is erroneous. And it's been confirmed, not just by Mr. Neufeld and myself, but also by a representative of the purchaser in an affidavit, I believe, that they submitted to the Board of Revision.
Okay. So you confirm that there's nothing stopping the city from rezoning in the agreement that's saying it can't be rezoned in the future? That's correct?
If you look, and I did cover that, but the zoning for the property covers all of the points that I indicated. Number 7 indicates nothing in this agreement shall affect the powers of the city to amend, repeal, or vary the zoning bylaw, etc. Now, that would be based on an application being made to rezone the property. The city isn't going to come and rezone it of their own accord, typically, unless they're expropriating the land, etc., for some other use. And as I indicated, the environment in that particular area is very, very heavily against development of that particular property, and it would continue forward. There's really no question. And again, we're not valuing what the property might become in the future. We're valuing what the property is today.
Is there any value to being set further back off a busy highway like Roblin, given 2 properties are exactly the same?
In terms of, noise.
Like having, yeah,
attenuation.
noise, pollution, like this particular type of assisted living, seniors, would, given two properties exactly the same, one that's sitting right on the highway and one that's set further back. Is there any value
Well,
to that?
I think it would be a very, very nominal change, but if you look at my page number 11 and the location of the property there, again, set right beside William Clement Parkway, so I believe the speed there is 80 kilometers an hour, so the traffic noise would be much greater on that road than it would be on most typical roadways.
And given two properties exactly the same, the one with the additional land, even though it has restrictions on it, would they be worth the same? Or would a nominal value apply to that?
There's no economic value to the land as it cannot be further developed. The amenity value is minimal, if any, and it certainly doesn't contribute in a financial way to the value of the property.
All right, those are my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Buss?
No questions.
Linda?
And I have no question.
I have no questions. Any? Carry on quickly to 2016-17.
Okay, so 2016 and 17, same property, same situation. The reduction to the 40T taxable was the same, $3 a square foot at $335,000. Reduction was made to the apartment section of the rent by lowering the quality. Rent comparables are found on page 4 below. The rent falls below both CMHC private apartment rents and the sales comparables, rent comparables rather, so that is reflective of the condition of the property. So it's the same issues with the zoning and whatnot. And 16 and 17, I think all the pictures and zoning agreements are in the previous one, as mentioned at the beginning of this property. So we've talked a lot about it. That's my presentation for 16 and 17.
Questions?
Just the one. Would land values be the same in earlier period? Or would they be lesser?
At $3 a square foot, they might be slightly more, slightly less. It's not really a type of piece of land that transacts that often, so it's hard to say.
We won't review this, I'll just pass it out for you as rebuttal, but all I'm indicating with this is that the properties that in both 16, 17, and 18, because they're all the same, that this is being compared to our bigger, better market apartments with balconies, et cetera, that are going to be considerably better. Now, that's all I'm providing with that information.
Okay.
No
And it
questions.
speaks for itself, yeah. Okay.
That's,
Did you have any questions on the rebuttal?
well, no, just that we have our rents lower than what these ones
Yeah.
are.
Okay. Mr. Buss?
Can you tell me again quickly what happened here to, the certain amount of land was deemed to be exempt? So then a sub-assessment was set out?
Yeah, so
But the value went up?
it was, so what happened, originally it was 4.5 acres that was school tax exempt in our system. As per the Municipal Assessment Act, only 2 acres, up to 2 acres are exempt, so the land that's above the 2 acres maximum was given.
Oh, I see, so it was taken out, yes, okay,
Yeah.
now I understand, yes. Okay, that's all my questions. Madam Chair.
I have no questions.
I have no questions.
I'll be 2 minutes.
Okay.
So, exactly the same process in terms of valuation. Same photos with the exception of page 9. I see that I did include the front entryway, just indication of the property, that's all. That's your first image going into it. The same methodology was followed for income and expense. We used the suburban area averages deducting 10% and used the city's effective gross income allowance of 52.46, giving us our NOI of 125.99, similar to the city's 123. In this case, we're lower. In 2018, we were slightly higher. That's what they've worked out to. The capitalization rate arguments are the same between the two assessment cycles. We really did not see any change in capitalization rates. So our same approach is taken here using the cap rate of 6.5%. And with regard to the land issue, I'm not going to call it additional land because it's really not. The city has made the presentation that because there is an exemption for school tax up to an area of 2 acres, and anything beyond that should be taxable. That's fine, and I understand that. But what we're arriving at here today is market value, and is there any market value to that land? The original assessment done for 2018 had no additional land factor for it. We were disputing the original $2.8 million assessed value, which would encompass the land. When they discovered that they hadn't attributed an additional value to the land on the front, they applied that. We've now shown conclusively that there is no possibility of developing that land. You cannot add to the economic value of this property, and there is no intent to attempt to split and sell it, and if you were, everybody is against it. So what you have is it. There is no market support for there being additional value to that land. So our final value is $1,855,000.
Thank you.
No questions.
Mr. Russ?